here we are, our podcast is beyond labels, and we've pretty much applied it to food and farming procedures, things like that. But we'd like to broaden that idea of beyond labels to this discussion because I believe that the uh, the psychological justification, the moral justification for this assassination came because as a society we are cavalierly or flippantly allowing labels to be thrown around that create unbelievable um, negative equity, if you will, negative equity in social discourse and behavior. We know that as biblically, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. We could say, as a man labels in his mind, so he does. And so if we allow ourselves to be taken in to labeling, it mentally, spiritually, psychologically, it actually affects our actions. It affects our words, our discussion, our messaging, how we talk about things, and how we interact with others. And so the fact that the terms, the labels, Nazi, fascist, these have been bandied about on behalf of Charlie Kirk for a long time, without any, just like a fact. And does anybody here think that if somebody had assassinated Hitler before, say, 1938, that we would have been spared a major world problem? I mean, hindsight's 2020, so you can't go there. But what I'm suggesting is that when you today, knowing what Nazi meant and what Hitler did, invoking that label on someone is not something you do gently. And let me be very humble and transparent here to our listeners. When I was a young fellow and starting into this, and the name calling pushback from the chemical industry side against me for using compost and things was developing, I fought back and actually used the term Nazi about Monsanto and about some of these things. And a dear friend who was a board member with me in the Virginia biological farming group, he was a World War II survivor. I'm gonna break down here in a minute. He had been injured in World War II and was a paraplegic and a farmer, and he was wonderful. He had figured out a way to grow strawberries and plants in raised bed gardens that he could access with his wheelchair. And they had a thriving, small, he and his wife, a thriving small farm that he was able to do. I mean, the guy did more from his wheelchair than most people do, that have working legs. And he pulled me aside one time and he said, "That's a that's a strong word, and you'd better reserve that carefully." And I'll never forget it. And he did it as a friend, and um, I've never forgotten it. And I've never used the term Nazi since because it is so bad and so reprehensible that you have to almost see the devil in order to use, sorry, in order to use that kind of term. And I grew up that day. I grew up that day. And and appreciated the admonition. And I never used it again to anyone with whom I disagreed, no matter how much I disagreed. And um, even today, I remember that even today when I have friends who invoke horrible labels on, for example, Bill Gates. Bill Gates is, I disagree with him on almost everything. Okay, but I'm not ready to say that he has bad intentions. Many people are, and they accuse me of being naive and all this kind of thing. Oh, don't you know how terrible, he's a devil, all this stuff. Well, I don't know. I don't know, and I've been a real I've been in great disagreement over the whole narrative and agenda regarding hate speech because I've had conversations with people with whom I violently disagree on policy, even messaging. And what I find is that their heart is sincere. They're trying to actually do well. I mean, even when our Commissioner of Agriculture in Virginia pulled me aside and said, Joel, we can't let people choose their food. If we do, we couldn't fill hospitals fast enough with all the sick people from getting, dirty farmers' food. That that violates everything I think about choice, freedom, diversity, personal agency, everything. But he takes his kids to soccer. He has a wife and kids, and who knows? He probably goes to the Lutheran church. I don't know. But my point is that I have to take him at face value. I have to if I label him something, then that's the first step to dehumanization and shutting down the the conversation. Friends, want to dive deeper into our thought-provoking conversations? Become part of the Beyond Labels family today by joining below. For any gift amount, you'll get access to the full uncut episodes.
Every contribution, whether big or small, keeps this podcast going.
So join us and expand your Beyond Labels experience. Thank you.